Hello and welcome to the second Lonesome Mythtakes, a thing I'm doing because I really love the sound of my own voice. Sometimes I wish I was my wife so I could hear myself talk. What an incredible gift. I'm Chris, and I produce a world-building podcast with my good friend Aaron. If you don't know what that is, I'll briefly describe it for you. We make playable role-playing game settings while exploring the creative process and sharing our work for free with you, the audience. We have a format that I thought would be interesting, where each of us works largely in isolation. That is, neither of us plans anything with the other, and we get together on the podcast and try to smooth out our ideas in a coherent setting that is usable for gaming. Each session culminates in a PDF setting document that is functional, good-looking, I hope, and is able to be printed out for the purposes of using our world in something like Dungeons & Dragons or another popular fantasy TTRPG. And as to why we're doing it, there's lots of reasons, many of which I went into during the first Lonesome Mythtakes, and many of which are expanded upon by listening to our podcast, something that I definitely recommend. I think we do a pretty good job. That's the self-promotion part of this. Check it out. As part of my screaming into the uncaring void, I don't want to do it because I want to be some kind of content producer. The whole idea fills me with dread and a certain amount of disgust. Not at other content creators, some of them are quite nice actually, but at the idea of that particular term applying to me in any meaningful way. I don't want to produce content, nebulous term that it is. I want to collaborate with my good friend on something we both find meaningful, and then as a secondary agenda, share it with people. Does that distinction make sense? Let me know in the comments if that sounds like an incredibly simplistic or misguided division. I'm not denying that we become content creators at the end of our creative process, almost by definition. But I suppose being podcasters or YouTubers isn't the driving force behind our endeavors. Aaron might disagree with that assessment, I don't know. Much like in my last video, I purport only to speak for myself, and I am by my reckoning a massive idiot, so what's the topic for today? I have blathered on a little bit here. I want to talk a little bit about two things that I think are very interesting. One is excess detail and the methodology of idea generation. I'm going to begin with the second one here because it relates directly to our own work and I can give you some solid examples of it. So, many years ago, I did a course at university which was called Idea Generation for Students of Design, which wasn't related to anything I was doing at the time, which proves what an idiot I am. But I found it a very worthwhile undertaking, and I feel like I use a lot of the knowledge gained from it in my day-to-day life. One of the core methodologies of idea generation, something that stuck with me, is that of quantity over quality, in the initial stages at least of creation. Let me give you an example. In the podcast, we both go in blind. I don't know what Aaron is bringing to the table, and he doesn't know what I'm bringing to the table. So in this way, we both can react to the revelations of the other host much like an audience member could. In the later section of our show, we have World War Words, where we hash out the particular ways our contributions fit into the world, change or expand on each other's work, and sort of iron out the kinks in any contradictions that we may have come up with. It's come up with a couple times. How do I decide what to bring for any particular episode? Do I write down material for, say, episode 1 or 3 or 6? I'll let you in on a secret. Firstly, I have no particular plans on what my contribution will be on a particular day. And secondly, I don't plan anything in a linear format at all. What I do have, as of right now, is a document in Google Docs that was at last count 130,000 words long. Pretty crazy, right? This plays into the core principle of idea generation for me, the concept that you should have an absolute dragon's hoard of material. It doesn't matter initially if this material is good or bad. Time and momentum will smooth over many of your ideas, change others, and the contributions of any potential collaborators, Aaron in my case, will alter the shape of many of these designs. So to me, having an excess of ideas is a feature, not a bug. I know, for example, that at the end of the 12 episodes, I will have tons of stuff left over. These are things that I thought of on the fly, stuff that I didn't make the cut because the world we're building changed so dramatically as to no longer hold a space for that thing, or we just ran out of time. And to be perfectly honest, if the season ran for 40 episodes, then my notes would also exponentially increase and we would be in the same situation. But that's very much by design. Quality over quantity doesn't mean necessarily that you produce garbage. It means that you do not have to discern the value of each idea until it hits the context of production. When we start a show, the vibe of it and the preceding information we have established helps very much to shape what follows. By having a wide variety of stuff to pick from, you are actually giving yourself space to breathe. You are allowing your setting, or whichever project it is that you are working on, some time to coalesce into something that makes sense and possesses some kind of appeal. That's my own core value here. I'm broadly interested in every aspect of the setting we produce, but by the process of collaboration, I am asking for my ideas to be filtered through three porous funnels: partnership, time, and context. Partnership is especially important when you are working with others. You have to remember that you are not the special main character of the venture, and that the golem you are constructing will take its cue from each of your partners in this endeavor. In our podcast framework, my ideas are no more or less important than Aaron's ideas. I hate to use the phrase marketplace of designs, but it really is. Through the format of the show, we create an environment where good ideas meet and the narrative cream rises to the top. Narrative cream is a trademark. You cannot have it. It's mine. Secondly, there's time. By generating a plethora of ideas, both good and bad, and adding to that melting pot, you are giving your concepts the chance to either find a foothold in your mind or not. You are giving them time to gestate, and you will know eventually if what you brought to the table is viable or not. There is a holistic aspect to this, which dictates that you are familiar enough with the type of material you are attempting to create that you over time are able to discern the gold from the dirt. Thirdly is context, or rather the momentum of context. My ideas and contributions over time are influenced by the work of the person I am collaborating with. See? We have a partnership. Aaron's vision for Heliakon, our partitioned fantasy city, is doubtless influenced by my additions and vice versa. Eventually, even within the structure of our podcast, which intentionally obfuscates theme, we find ourselves in a place where we are subconsciously at first and intentionally after a period of having worked together actually creating along the same axis. Our work is parallel, but we're trying to define the shape of something together. So there it is, idea generation and how I think it works. I think this is an important aspect of any creative undertaking. You must be open to the evolution of your concept as it hits these critical outside influences, that of other material produced, and also that of the weight of the information or product that you have already made. Let's kind of over-intellectualize it again. An anecdote I am very fond of is that of how Michelangelo viewed sculpture. You might know this one. He would look at a big hunk of marble or whatever, and he believed that the shape of the sculpture already existed in some fundamental way within that unworked slab. So his job as an artist was to merely cut away the excess and to reveal a foundational truth which always lay there. And he managed to do it while also being a Ninja Turtle and protecting New York City. So, I mean, that's pretty amazing. So, he must have been onto something there, I think. So the second thing I want to talk about today is the idea of excess detail. This is a world-building specific topic, so I hope it is as engaging for you as it is for me. I'm very interested in this. I think an excess of data, of information in the idea generation stage is brilliant, but an excess of detail might be something that becomes problematic. What do I mean by excess detail? So I want you to imagine that you are sitting right now in front of a computer or a device, consuming media and enjoying yourself. Shouldn't be too taxing. Tell me how your computer works. You might know some terms like CPU or RAM, and you might know what they stand for. You might know the difference between, resistive and capacitive touchscreen mechanics. But can you explain on any technical level how these things work? How are they made exactly? What is it about the interaction of the parts that turns a bunch of plastic and metal and mineral into a smartphone? Chances are, unless you work with these technologies closely, that you do not know this stuff. Maybe you can't even explain how electricity works while using it every single day. That's nothing to be ashamed of or embarrassed about. Our world is a complex machine constructed from a myriad other complex machines, and to try and comprehend every part of it would likely take your lifetime or longer. The level of detail involved in explaining and defining every aspect of every corner of your world is not just overkill, it can actively harm your setting. Something that a lot of world builders, I think, get stuck on is excess detail. They look at creators such as Tolkien, a linguist and professor who created a variety of fictional languages for his novels, and they look at this process as kind of a guiding light. Now, here I want to make an important distinction between general world building and practical world building. The former is a hobby people engage in all the time, where they create settings for the joy of it. They learn about various subjects, plate tectonics and tide dynamics and all kinds of interesting science, which is great so that they can make a world as detailed and realistic as possible. And often they have intricate notes of the cultures, the religious practices and languages which exist in their setting and how they all relate together. And this is certainly a valid way to approach that particular aspect of the hobby. But the other side of it, the things that concern our podcast and me, is practical world building, by which I mean creating enough of an environment in which it is possible to tell stories or game in. Our focus is the gaming side of things at the moment, and certainly that is the nucleus of our podcast. And even within this, there exist multiple distinctions and definitions. A setting could be implied rather than defined, be it by fiction or game mechanics. We're sitting somewhere in the middle of this particular description. When we create settings that we want to use, either for playing games in or for telling stories in, we must be wary of falling into this trap of trying to work out every aspect of our world. How did the continents form? The history of every nation in great detail, the exact mechanics of magic, origins and physiology of every race. I think these things can be interesting, but where do you stop? The simple fact is actually that despite what I'm saying, there is no line. You can continue to develop this stuff as long as you like. However, for our purposes, what we are doing, there exists a point at which we have over-explained stuff. Remember that if we are making a setting for people to play in, to imagine themselves in, we have to make it playable, readable, and crucially, we actually have to leave things out. I think there have to be dark corners in that world where the players or the game master are able to fill in the details, giving them more of an ownership of the place. This helps with the idea of an emergent narrative in role-playing scenarios, as well as an emergent setting, a version of the world that, while it is defined in some ways by its creators, like Aaron and myself, it can also become part of the mosaic and story co-constructed by others. Does that make sense? I hope so. Like I stated previously, I'm mainly putting this up for myself. I want to take a look back at this justification explanation in a year or 5 years and see if it still makes sense, if it still holds up, and if it has helped me generate some alternate takes or methodologies. I'll leave us there. If you have stuck with me, thank you so much. Take a look at the podcast and have a truly magical day. Thank you.